Hey, I'm Willette, and this is Soul Creative Art Studio. Today, I will create a monochromatic cityscape inspired by the artistic talents of Nile, Livingston, and Kehinde, Wiley. In the first part of the video, I will create a monochromatic composition with the tints of the color blue. Remember Lesson 3 when I made a monochromatic value scale showing the tints and shades of the color red? I will use the information learned in that lesson to create the first part of the monochromatic cityscape. The monochromatic color scheme will give my painting the illusion of depth and space. Let's take a look at Philly Rising, a collaborative living mural designed by African-American female artist Nile Livingston in collaboration with Mural Arts Philadelphia. And yes, this is a living mural. The images are continuously in motion. It was created in 2020 during the pandemic to connect the community and show the resilient spirit of the city of Philadelphia. Livingston invited people in the community to submit photos and artwork online to create this collaborative project. Nile Livingston constructed a digital painting of the skyline, but I will use canvas, paint, and paper to make a cityscape. We will begin by painting a blue monochromatic background on a 16 by 20-inch canvas. The background is the area that appears to be behind other objects or farther away from the viewer. I have chosen blue and white acrylic paint to mix together to make different tints of blue for the sky. You will also need a paintbrush, a palette, water cup, paper towel, pencil, and a circular object to make circles, or you can draw them freehand. Let's begin by laying the canvas down in the portrait position. I'm using a lid to trace the first circle, which is the moon. I want my sky to appear moonlit, so I will draw my smallest circle close to the upper right-hand corner of the canvas. Feel free to draw your moon or sun anywhere you like, but make sure it's at the top of the canvas. Draw the remaining circles, extending each circle off the sides of the canvas. The circles should increase in size as you move away from the moon. I've drawn 6 curved lines to create 7 sections. Each section will be painted with a different tint of blue. Place a $half size amount of white and blue paint on the palette. Let's paint the moon white. For the next circle surrounding the moon, I will make a tint of blue by adding a small amount of blue paint to the white paint. Continue to fill in the remaining sections by gradually adding more blue to the white paint. The background is complete. Allow the paint to dry before moving on to part 2 of the project. The additional materials you would need for part 2 of the project are newspaper, watercolors, colored cardstock, construction paper, scissors, a glue stick, and a ruler. Once the paint is dry, I will begin working on the buildings that I will make by cutting out parts of the classified section of the newspaper. The repetitive text in the classified section will serve as abstract windows in architecture. Use yellow, orange, and red watercolors to create colorful, obscure buildings in the distance. Make sure the colors bleed together. Completely cover the newspaper. After the newspaper dries, cut out rectangles and squares of different heights and widths to represent the buildings and rooftops. This will make a unique skyline. Once you've decided where you're going to place your shapes, start gluing your buildings down. We will complete the cityscape by adding colorful, energetic buildings inspired by the paintings of Kehinde Wiley. Wiley is famously known as the artist who painted former President Barack Obama's portrait in 2018. When he was young, Wiley had the opportunity to visit art galleries on the weekends. As he observed the 18th and 19th century classical art, he noticed that the master artists painted their subjects in traditional classical positions representing power and wealth, but he also noticed that people of color were not a part of the narrative. You can see how Wiley was inspired by the classical style in his creative response. Kehinde Wiley's signature portraits of contemporary Black men and women are set in decorative, ornate backgrounds. Their heroic poses are similar to those of traditional classical paintings. Wiley's subjects often wear sneakers, hoodies, natural hairstyles, and gear associated with hip-hop culture. He reinterprets classical art forms by shifting traditional notions of power and representation to groups of people not normally seen in traditional classical scenarios, bringing attention to a variety of new narratives. I was inspired by Wiley's painted patterns in the background and I will utilize that same technique to emphasize the buildings in my composition. A pattern is an arrangement of repetitive lines, shapes, or other elements over the surface of an area. I will use the vibrant patterns on the buildings to create emphasis. The term emphasis means to draw attention to or make a specific part stand out. As a result, the buildings will stand out as the foreground of my composition. The foreground is the part of the composition that is closest to the viewer. The background is the monochromatic blue sky that appears farther away in the distance. Understanding the art terms pattern, emphasis, foreground, and background are important when you are trying to create visual space and depth in a composition. For the colorful buildings in the foreground, I will cut out buildings from this decorative cardstock. I found this cardstock booklet in the clearance bin at Michael's, but you can also use construction paper, wrapping paper, or any interesting paper you have on hand. When you make your buildings, you can either use a ruler to cut out rectangular shapes, or you can cut the shapes freehand if you want your city to appear modern or futuristic. You can cut out triangles to add to the top of the buildings, or the roofs can be flat. I encourage you to experiment with different shapes and sizes. Take a look at the color papers and patterns you choose. Which colors work well next to each other? Remember the color wheel? Complementary and monochromatic color schemes are harmonious. They are a combination of similar elements to create a sense of unity. But contrast is also interesting because different elements create variety. Once you've decided where you're going to place your shapes, start gluing your buildings down. Overlapping and leaving small spaces between buildings to see other buildings add to the illusion of space and movement in the composition. Don't forget about the windows. Cut small squares to glue onto your buildings. This will break up the monotony of the shapes. You can make the windows the same color or switch it around to give the appearance of lights in each room. The monochromatic cityscape is complete. Now here's something extra. Use newspaper pieces of different size text and colors to make all of the buildings. Add different clippings to give the buildings the illusion of various textures and colors. If you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button to see more. And continue to be so creative.